See, I'm just like barely even using my knife. I'm just sort of pulling this out. The most valuable part of the pork is this top. The loin is where all the money is. The subprimals are going to be a rib loin, a center cut or short loin, and sirloin, or like quite literally end of the loin, right? Butchery is hard. It's like learning choreography. There's 10 steps. You know, first you remove this, then you debone this. And all the time as you're doing this in whole animal butchery, you're also trying to piece together, you know, this anatomy. So now we have our 3 primals. So really, like, we've got our strip loin, our short loin, and our rib loin. Using a boning knife, removing all of these bones, you get down to this single barrel of a muscle. And that's exactly what they're making this into. They're tying these into loin roasts. The thing that people don't realize is how much work goes in behind the scenes. The butchery is beautiful, but there needs to be, I think, a greater understanding of what it takes to get food to plate. Definitely one of the most important things is to be on top of inventory every day and how the meat's looking. Come on in. All of our meat is sourced directly from local farmers that I have individual relationships with. They know from when the animal was born that it's raised for primal supply, and when it's at market weight, it's going to go to the slaughterhouse. We receive a delivery every week from our slaughterhouse, approximately 6 whole beef every week and 12 whole hogs every week. We've still got 4 beef tenderloins remaining out of the original 12 that we received. These are the short rib plates. We had 12 of these to start. It looks like we're through about half of them. The different farmers on my schedule, they just simply show up at the slaughterhouse on the date that they're scheduled, and they go back to their farm and they focus on farming. Got lots of whole pork bellies down here. Our beef take 2 years to raise to market weight. You know, what do I think that I need now? What do I think I need 6 months from now? What do I think I need 1 to 2 years from now? And that's an ongoing and constant conversation with myself and the farmers. So the cut room at HQ is definitely a major hub of activity. There's so much planning and so much work that happens in that room every day. This is kind of how our stuff comes from the slaughterhouse. Like, that's just the entire beef shank, so that we still have a lot of flexibility about how we butcher them. We're raising pasture-raised animals. They're gonna be consistently inconsistent, but we're still trying to kind of keep them within a spec. So Autumn is going to start with something like this that has like way more of a fat cap than a typical customer would want, and then portion them down to something beautiful like this, which is like exactly the amount of fat that you want on a pork chop. But we do end up with all of this. This is like the excess fat that's being cut off of those pork chops. That's what we'll grind, that's what we'll pass to the kitchen, and that becomes lard so that that doesn't become waste for us. I like to keep 3 knives. So I always have a 6-inch boning knife. It's semi-flexible. You can kind of like use a little pressure and it'll sort of follow the thing a little bit more. It's really nice with larger things to be able to have a knife that's like this one, but longer, so I can get in and like cut the whole way through something. And then this knife, which I guess is technically a scimitar, for cutting large steaks. I can get into it and I can draw with one solid knife movement. You know, the best butchery is like your knife is invisible. And then this is something called a bone scraper. And when you cut bones with a saw, it creates something that we call bone dust. So this tool is pretty cool. You just kind of run it along it. You can see how it just kind of picks it up in the gaps and takes that bone dust off of the meat. This whole animal craft butchery is something that there is not a lot of. So since starting Primal Supply almost 5 years ago, I've actually trained a lot of butchers. So when we start with a whole animal and we break it down into kind of the largest possible parts and pieces, they're called primal cuts. So on a pork, we have 4 primals: a leg, which is a ham, a shoulder, the top half of it is the loin, and the bottom half is the belly. Ugh. Before we break this into the primal, I'm just going to do one thing, which is to remove the tenderloin. This is the most tender muscle in the body because it doesn't really do anything. It's the money right here. I can find the natural seams between the muscles. This is our waist. We do save a lot of fat and render it, but the stuff that's exposed on the outside. And then he's got some bones, you know, so we can remove the meat between them, but then we'll cut these down on the bandsaw into smaller pieces that are roastable, and these will end up in the kitchen. This is all the trim. This is something that we'll go through it and we'll double check the fat ratio. We want it to be 80-20 meat to fat. And this ultimately will become our ground beef. We produce tons of this. Off of like an 800-pound beef, we could generate up to 200 pounds of trim. So we make all of our sausage in-house as whole animal butchers. The trim that comes from pork and beef, we are making fresh sausage almost every day. I'm sourcing about 6 whole beef every week. They average about 700 pounds per carcass. The usable part of that animal is maybe 70%. Our chef Damon is probably one of my most important team members, always managing the meat. He's intentionally creating to help us use things that wouldn't otherwise sell in a high enough volume fresh. So we also have this cooked inventory of product.
Working with a butcher as opposed to a restaurant is great because all the meat is as fresh as it could possibly be. It's coming like direct from the source. And I can also troubleshoot with them a little bit. If I wanted a little fatty or a little less fatty, ground just a little different, that's kind of like immediate results.
The broth trend is the best thing that could ever happen to a whole animal butcher.
Making a beautiful beef stock. So we roast off trays and trays of bones. About an hour and a half in the oven, and then we do them overnight. And we end up with about 40 to 60 quarts of beef stock a week. So I'm rendering out pork fat, rendering it into nice clean lard, and we sell it in 16-ounce containers for retail customers.
The tallow is beef fat, the lard is pork fat, and the tallow does tend to have this, it's more like a coconut oil or something, right, when it's cold, and the pork fat tends to be softer. We do have customers that come and shop at this location, and we open at noon on weekdays, so we're just kind of like in the final steps of making sure that everything is pretty and set for the day. Meatballs and pasta sauce and chili, these are all things that use like ground beef broth as a base. It's pretty important to me that as many days as possible I can get down there and just kind of check in and see what's happening and make sure they feel supported. We are able to cut meat to order on site at this location, which we love. Kind of just realized that we needed a place to connect to customers in person. What he's actively peeling out right now is a flank steak. Smooth, long grain, pretty lean. Most people know a flank steak, it's definitely desirable. There's only one of these on each side of a beef. So the other muscle that he's going to pull out of this is called the bavette. And we're always trying to teach customers about alternative cuts. Some of my farmers joke that they talk to me more than other people in their lives. They're working so hard on those inputs, but they don't know what it's producing. So I can let them know if it's successful or if it's unsuccessful, and I can give them that feedback that they need to improve. This afternoon, the butchers have been cutting all day, so we've got a ton of meat here moving into the packaging station that we're going to check in on. As the butchers work throughout the day, they will just continually rack up cuts on these speed racks and get these guys into packages. Sirloin steaks, we've got some beef baseball steaks, we've got some beef shanks, pork loin roast, some pork copa steak, some things that are more like, these are 1 pound bags of beef stir fry. They'll get bagged here, they run through the machine, they get sealed. So everything gets its final packaged label that includes a lot of information for us. We do a lot of meat math around here, and we try to collect as much data as possible because it's really helpful for us to be on top of exactly how many steaks we yield on average out of a muscle and be able to plan distribution to all of the programs and locations. I have never existed in the industrial commodity meat system. I just really don't know another way. I came into butchery because I wanted to find new ways to improve and support a local supply chain that supports pasture-based farmers. So I've worked really hard since the start of Primal Supply to kind of diversify our market. Our Butchers Club is basically, it's kind of modeled off of a CSA, this idea that our customers commit to an ongoing subscription where they want to get a box of meat every week. It's super cool for us because we have several hundred members in the program. We do tend to prioritize them. I like to reward their commitment to us by making sure that they get some of the better stuff, you know? Basically, we're down to all of the parts that are left after we've extracted the merchandisable cuts. So now Autumn is going through all of this and turning everything into trim. We definitely count on restaurants having burgers and ground beef because, the trim and the use of ground beef is definitely what makes our world go round. Some of the smaller, higher end fine dining restaurants might buy beef loins to cut into high-end steaks. So it's the end of the day here, pretty much cleaning and wrapping, breaking everything down. Everybody walks through and says goodbye to me and walks out the door and goes home, and I'm like, thanks, see you tomorrow.